It's May 2025 and I'm continuing my visit to Metz by visiting the German gate in this French city that was German, then French, then German, then French, then German, then French. At the point where the Seine River flows into the Moselle, and today close to the tri-point junction of France, Germany and Luxembourg, the city of Metz has a rich cultural and architectural history linked to both of those junctions. Perhaps the most dominating of the city's architecture is its cathedral, the Cathédrale Saint-Etienne de Metz, or the Cathedral of St. Stephen. At 41.41 metres, the cathedral has the third highest nave of any cathedral in France, behind Amiens and Beauvais, and is nicknamed Le Lanterne du Bon Dieu, or the Good Lord's Lantern, due to it having the largest expanse of stained glass in the world, totalling 6,496 square metres, just slightly less than a rugby pitch. The diocese dates back to at least the 4th century, which does slightly unpick the Grauli legend and Clemens of Metz as the first bishop, as that's said to have taken place 300 years earlier. At the highest point in the surrounding landscape and overlooking the river, this was the location of a Gallo-Roman fortified town that was created following the conquering of native tribes by the armies of Julius Caesar in 52 BCE. Towards the end of the Roman Empire, the site was the imperial residence, being in use from 306 to around 390. The first cathedral building was constructed on the site around the 5th century and was dedicated to St. Stephen. It is said that the cathedral contained a collection of his relics, and the shrine was the only structure that was spared during Attila the Hun's attack on the area in 451. The church is mentioned by Gregory of Tours in 584, and there's a mention of the cathedral under control of the Archbishop Arnauld in 616. The construction of the new cathedral began under Bishop Thierry I between 965 and 984 and was completed in the first half of the 11th century. Unlike most cathedrals, due to the geographical constraints, the terrace above the Moselle that it was built on, the cathedral doesn't have the traditional east to west orientation from the choir to the west facade. Instead, it's orientated on an axis from the southeast to the northwest. This cathedral was constructed in a pre-Romanesque style called Ottonian style, but this soon fell out of favour and plans were put in place at the start of the 13th century to reconstruct cathedral in Gothic style. Construction started sometime after 1239, commencing at the west end of the nave and continuing down the nave to the transept and old choir. Work had progressed well and was close to finish by 1250 when the decision was taken to make the cathedral much taller, with the addition of a new level of large windows. This required the addition of more columns, strengthening works, and the south facade being built up to match the new height of the nave. The knock-on effect of this was that now the towers also had to be raised, and this work was undertaken after 1275. Work was mostly finished by 1359, but further tinkering went on until the end of the century. In 1468, a serious fire broke out in the roof. In the years before the fire, there had been a dispute between the cathedral authorities and the city leaders over who was responsible for the safety of cathedral properties. The bishop ended the dispute by excommunicating the city leaders. Consequently, when the fire broke out, the city leaders refused to assist with fighting the fire, only sending men to put out the fire on the bell tower, which was owned by the city. After rebuilding works, the cathedral was finally consecrated on the 11th of April 1552, just in time to coincide with the Republic of Metz being sold by its German princes to the King of France. Following damage during and after the French Revolution, the cathedral deteriorated to the point where it was in danger of collapse. The vaults were reported to shake when the bells rang in the tower, and wood in the tower and roof was rotting. With Metz passing into the German Empire following the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, the new ruler, Kaiser Wilhelm, took particular interest in rebuilding and restoring the cathedral to win the support of the population. Reconstruction works began in 1874 and carried on for decades, with ongoing repair works still taking place in 2025. The difficulties in constructing the cathedral can be seen from the Place de Chambre, just below the cathedral, which shows how quickly the land falls away towards the river, as well as showing just how dominant the building is on the landscape. This is also a convenient place to start a walk to explore more of Metz architecture and history, taking in a couple of the islands and the remaining fortifications of the city. Connected to the mainland by multiple bridges, including the Pont de la Préfecture, is the Île de Petit Souci. The island is home to both the cultural and political centre of the city, with the Opera Theatre de Metz complex occupying a large part of the southwestern part of the island, and the Préfecture de la Moselle occupying most of the northeastern side of the island. At the southern tip, the Temple Neuf dominates the skyline, surrounded by the Jardin d'Amour, whilst the northern tip is the Jardin Fabert. The Opera House is the oldest opera house working in France and one of the oldest in Europe. Construction on the site started in 1732, with the building inaugurated 20 years later. Immediately in front of the opera is the Place de la Comédie, which during the years of the French Revolution was the location of a more brutal form of entertainment, as it was the site of the town's guillotine. Originally built to seat 1,382, the opera has been remodelled on a number of occasions, with a major remodelling in the 1960s reducing the seating capacity to 750 to improve comfort and sight lines. As well as being a favourite preening spot for the local heron population, the Jardin Fabert forms the northern tip of the island, and from here it's possible to look downstream to see more of the bridges over the Moselle as the river heads towards its confluence with the Seille. On the northern bank of the river are the remains of old locks and weirs that were part of an old mill that operated on the Moselle. Crossing over the river on the northern bank and just beyond the tip of the island are the ruins of the church of St. Livier. Originally built in the 9th century and then rebuilt in the 13th and again in the 15th centuries, the church was dedicated to Saint Livier, a Roman officer from Metz who defended the city against Attila the Hun's raids in 451. The church became surplus to requirements when the parish was merged with that of the nearby Saint-Vincent in 1791, with the church being deconsecrated and subdivided into apartments. With the regeneration of the area around the church in the 1970s, part of the structure was destroyed to make way for new buildings, leaving a picturesque set of ruins. From the Pont Saint-Georges, there are views back onto those 1970s buildings, as well as down onto the former wash house located on the banks of the river, where citizens would have been able to bring their clothes down to the river and wash them in the running water. There are also views back down on the Jardin Fabert and up to the cathedral on its terrace above the river. The bridge also marks the start of the Chemin des Corporations, the riverside walk that takes you past most of the remaining parts of the city fortifications still facing the Moselle, around to the fortifications on the Seille River. The medieval ramparts were built in stages between the 13th and 16th centuries and were the first new fortifications to be built in the city since the Romans had departed around 800 years prior. At their maximum extent, the fortifications consisted of a 7-kilometre perimeter wall with 38 watchtowers and 18 gates. In the 13th century, the then free city of the empire, Metz, experienced a period of particular economic prosperity, causing its powerful neighbours to become covetous. To avoid any risk of invasion, the city took the decision to replace the Roman wall, which had served the city well up until then, having been maintained and even raised and reinforced in the 9th and 10th centuries. The initial build started around 1196 and was completed by 1230, though works on some of the gates to strengthen and bolster them continued through until the 1530s. The towers of the wall were named with the corporations responsible for their maintenance, which is why you pass towers such as the Tour de Tesserins, or Weaver's Tower, the first of the surviving towers, Tour de Chevriers, or Goat Herders' Towers, and towers for stable masters and boilermakers. At certain points there are even larger towers, such as the Devil's Tower, which marks a point where the fortifications take a 90-degree turn and head south, as they stop following the Moselle and start to follow the Seille River instead. The Madeleine Gate is one of the smaller gates through the city walls and is opposite a small bridge that marks the northernmost crossing point over the Seine River. Crossing the river here also allows you to deviate away from the medieval walls and leap forward a couple of centuries to the more complex and dramatic fortifications of the Fort de Bellecroix, a bastion system built in the 18th century on the eastern bank of the Seine River to work alongside the Fort Moselle built for northwest of the city centre to protect Metz. Construction work began in 1734 and making use of around 6,000 troops, 200 masons, 100 quarrymen and 2,700 earth movers. Works are completed in 6 years. The works consisted of 4 bastions, 3 curtain walls and 3 ravelins protected by 3 kilometres of dry ditches and 4.6 kilometres of countermine galleries. The fort was further reinforced under Napoleon III towards the end of the 19th century, but were rendered obsolete by the construction of more forts further out from the city centre, whilst the city was under the control of the Kaiser. Used as barracks in the Second World War, the site was used as warehouses after the conflict before being decommissioned in 1954 and transferred to the city, who converted it into a city park, albeit now the fortifications heavily overgrown. Back to the medieval city walls, and we picked the route up again a little way down through the Seine River at the Tour des Esprits and the Tour des Chandeliers, or Candlestick Tower. Here, the building of the modern road network through the city has cut into the walls, but they also help to show the thickness of the original construction. The final major surviving part of the fortifications is perhaps the most impressive, the Porte des Allemands, or German Gate. A heavily fortified bridge and gate combination that protected the city from the approaches from the east and then competing members of the Holy Roman Empire. Initial construction of the gate started around 1230 and had already been completed by 1267 when the gate was described as one of the 7 main gates of the city. The gate was developed over the centuries as it was reinforced and expanded, with much of that still visible. The initial gate faced the city on the western side of the river. Approaching the city, you'd cross a bridge and reach the gate, which was formed for 2 round towers that are still intact today. Sometime around 1445, in order to control access to the bridge, a gatehouse, built of 2 much more imposing towers, complete with crenellations, were constructed on the eastern bank. Following the construction of the eastern towers, attention turned to the bridge itself, and it was fortified between 1480 and 1550, adding watchtowers and higher walls, turning the whole complex into a small fort. The bridge itself was brought into the role of defence by being fitted with portcullises which could be lowered to block the river. The gate served many purposes once its defensive function was lost, including acting as a store for part of the city's archaeological collections as well as other museum artefacts. It continued to operate as a bridge until the early 20th century when a modern road bridge was constructed next door, but to today it continues to serve as a pedestrian crossing over the river. Major renovation works were carried out between 2013 and 2014, which restored the structure, including opening up rooms in the towers and giving access to the terrace from where you can overlook the arcades inside the complex. Another major complex spanning multiple buildings in the heart of the city is the Musée de La Cour de Metz, or the Metz Golden Court Museum. The museum was founded in 1839 elsewhere in the city, and over the years has expanded into a labyrinthine organisation of rooms through multiple historic buildings, including the Petit Carmes Abbey, the Chevreumont Granary and the Trinitaires Church. The museum is split into 4 broad sections: history and archaeology, medieval, architecture and fine arts. You enter the museum through the converted church of the Petit Carmes Abbey. The front portal immediately recognisable as a church, except for the main entrance having been replaced with a gigantic window, and where steps as once have taken you up to it, an accessible entrance into the lower lobby. The reception area and gift shop of a museum in the main nave of the former church, and consequently is a pretty stunning structure itself, with a modern spiral staircase coming up from the lobby into the space, and then the original outline of the chapel visible. The first part of the visit is to the history and archaeology of the city, which is apt as when the building was extended in the 1930s, the remains of Gallo-Roman baths were uncovered, which are today on display in situ in the lower galleries. After the Romans left, it's believed the site was the location for the palace of the Merovingian kings who lived in the city between the 6th and 8th centuries, hence the choice of the name for the museum as the Golden Court. Alongside the Roman finds, there are also displays of archaeological finds from across the city and wider region. There are also preserved elements of architecture from around the city, from original fragments of buildings to entire small buildings held inside the museum to show how the city would once have looked. And as with any good city museum, there's the customary model map of the city as it would have looked during its golden age. The Chevreumont Granary was built in 1457 and topped with battlements to make it look more imposing. Originally designed as an arsenal, it was converted into a grain granary at the end of the 15th century before serving as a warehouse for the city. Today, the ground floor of the granary houses a gallery dedicated to Lorraine religious statuary. The The final part of the museum moves back into the former buildings of the Abbey to conclude with a fine art collection housed over numerous rooms. Metz Nancy-Lorraine Airport is located 16.5 kilometres southeast of Metz, linked by shuttle bus, but with only a small number of flights predominantly to Algeria and Morocco. The nearest major international airport is Luxembourg, which can be accessed in around 90 minutes by TER train to Luxembourg station and then the tram out to the airport. Luxembourg Airport is home base to Luxair and has flights to many cities across Europe, as well as direct flights to China. Gare de Metz-Ville has regular TGV services to Paris, taking around 90 minutes to make the journey, as well as TER regional services across Grand Est and to Saarbrücken in Germany.